Hello, Kurt Jackson here with this week's installment of Your Money Matters. I'm sorry I missed last week. I was in North Carolina for some training, learned some great things that I think I can help implement into my practice to help my clients more and more, which would include hopefully some of those of you that are watching this. Uh, I do a lot of research, and I find that I guess that kind of makes me a little different, or a lot different than a lot of advisors, because I don't think they really keep up with all the trends and all the way that things can go. And one of the guys who I follow is a gentleman by the name of Van Mueller, and I get a monthly newsletter from him, and he's got some great insights, and I think he's really dialed in. Been in the financial planning industry for many years. But basically, today our topic is will taxes go higher? And we're going to talk about the math that says they will. So, the president submitted his budget to Congress for fiscal year 2016, and there are many important takeaways from his budget proposal that, range from simple to complex. The budget request also starts to point in the direction that the government's going to be going to raise the revenue that they're going to need to provide the promised benefits as the baby boomers increasingly make their way to Social Security and Medicare. I've tried to talk about this on many occasions, that there's truly not enough revenue to meet the required payments, no matter how much we would raise taxes. So let's look at it this way. If the unfunded liability for Social Security and Medicare are currently $126 trillion and climbing, and that's according to Professor Lawrence Kotlikoff, who's an economics professor at Boston University. He says the fiscal gap for the whole country is $221 trillion. Well, we're in serious trouble, and here's why. Because the math tells us. All right, let's say the government changed the tax laws and declared that there would be a new 1040 form, and the return would have only 2 lines. How much did you make would be 1 line, and the line 2 would say, send it in. Think about that. The gross domestic product, how much money we create in the United States, is $17 trillion. So if we used every penny of that to meet the unfunded liability of Social Security and Medicare, it would take about 7.5 years of every penny of the outputs of goods and services in our country. If we try to meet Professor Kotlikoff's fiscal gap, it would take nearly 14 years. So even if we met those gaps, all right, we would still create other enormous gaps that we would have to make up if they weren't funded for 7 to 14 years. So I really want you to get a feel for this. At a time when the foreign and domestic threat of ISIS is increasing exponentially, we do not have the money to fund the Homeland Security Department of our government. So if I'm correct, and we don't raise taxes enormously, why will taxes increasingly become a priority issue in financial and retirement planning? And that's the question we need to address. Now, before I answer that, let me restate why we cannot and probably will not raise taxes too much higher. All right? Our country produces $17 trillion of goods and services annually. At the federal level, we pay $3 trillion in taxes, and those are derived from income taxes, Social Security taxes, Medicare, corporate income taxes, and estate taxes. At the state and local level, they raise an additional $3 trillion in taxes in form of income taxes, sales taxes, and property taxes. So if you divide $6 trillion by $17 trillion, that's 35%. Now that doesn't include fees, levies, licenses, so which are all also taxes, but we just call them something different. Please consider this. If we raise taxes much higher, we will have a socialist economy. Okay? When you take too much money from the private sector and give it to the government, the economy cannot grow or recover. There's never been a socialist economy on the planet Earth that has worked. Right? So raising taxes too much more will be non-productive. So why will tax planning continue to be one of the most important aspects of financial and retirement planning? Well, this is actually very easy to explain to you. So you need to understand it, and you got to understand this as soon as possible. The Secretary of the Treasury, Lou, former Federal Reserve Chairs Alan Greenspan and Ben Bernanke, current Federal Reserve Chair Janet Yellen, President Obama, probably, unfortunately, in my opinion, soon to be President Hillary Clinton, have all given speeches pertaining to one subject matter, and that is income inequality. Okay, they have given many speeches about that one particular aspect of our society. And why would they do that? Well, here are a couple important statistics. First, 50% of Americans arrive at death or retirement with no money saved. Okay? Nothing at all. 75% arrive at death or retirement with less than $28,000. So how will those people survive 10, 20, 25, 30 years in retirement? All right. Will we let those people go hungry? No, all right, we're not going to. Will we let them go without shelter? No, we won't do that. Finally, will we let them go without health care? We already know the answer to that. So where are we going to get the money for all this? Well, what we like to call, I guess, the new middle class is people who have assets between $100,000 and $20 million. This is going to be the new middle class. So we're going to transfer wealth by changing the tax laws. Right? Eventually, the internal buildup of life insurance and annuities will probably be taxed on an accrual basis or annual basis. Life insurance death benefits will probably be taxed over a 250, 500,000, 750, something along those lines. I think that's going to be tough to get done. Probably be the last things that they do because it'll be tougher to do. The deductions for state income tax, property income tax, home mortgage interest, health insurance, and medical out-of-pocket and even charity will likely disappear. They're going to do this fairly easily because they're going to sell it to the American people that only rich people itemize. Okay, that we're going after the rich to benefit the middle class and the poor. Now, the current budget proposal is the beginning salvo of the transfer of wealth that's coming. Now, before I get to some of the specific proposals, two important things should be shared with you. All right, first, the requested budget this year is for $4 trillion. But remember, we only bring in $3 trillion in federal taxes. So where does that other trillion come from? Does our government, does our government live way beyond their means? And won't it become untenable as more and more baby boomers retire? Second, will the government get all the changes that they're requesting? Of course they won't. But please remember this one thing, okay? And I talk about this in the way that with my clients. How do you eat an elephant? Well, you do it one bite at a time, right? So that's how the government's going to eliminate these tax benefits, a little at a time until there are no tax benefits. The government understands that this is a process, and you should understand that as well. So you're running out of time to get the planning that you need, okay, to keep you in control of your income tax liabilities. The government's not stupid, and to the contrary, they're very cunning, they're persistent, and they're not going to stop in this effort to raise the revenues that provide the benefits to their constituents, what the constituents want, even if they are ultimately detrimental to the American people. So please listen to some of the tax proposals made in the budget and see if you agree that the government is beginning to look at the process of transferring more wealth. First, they want to eliminate tax breaks for the net unrealized appreciation. Right? This allowed some of your retirement savings to be taxed as long-term gains, which are lower rates, rather than ordinary income, which is higher. Okay? They want to limit the Roth conversions to only allow conversions of pre-tax dollars. This was the famous backdoor Roth IRA. This would be eliminated under the new tax law. The Roth IRAs would also require minimum distributions at 70.5 to match regular IRAs, and that would get taxable money back into the system rather than continuing it to allow it to tax deferral growth, maybe even on to other generations. Okay? The budget also requests a maximum tax deduction of 28% for contributions to your 401k and IRAs, even if your tax bracket is higher. And here's a big one. They want to eliminate the inherited or stretch IRAs for anyone except your spouse. Now, this has a very good chance of passing because these benefits are for retirement. All right? The government feels non-spouses are not retirement recipients. You do have a better stretch provision in our industry. We call it life insurance. Okay? But pensions can be inherited tax income free for pennies on the dollar. Almost another sure-to-pass change will be a step up in basis. So elimination of this benefit will raise additional revenue and is easily sellable because taxes should never be forgiven as someone dies. Okay? So many of you don't sell long-held stocks or mutual funds so they can be forgiven enormous capital gains at death. That's that step up in basis. If you hold that asset until you die, the capital gain on that asset is forgiven up to the value up to the date of death. This proposal plus the proposal to increase the capital gains rate, which I think will eventually be eliminated, the capital gains rate will be eliminated and replaced with the with all income being taxed as ordinary income, also provides a current opportunity to do some planning. All right. Here's a rule that Van Mueller calls it the 78-15 rule. It says if married people over the age of 65 that make less than $98,000 of taxable income, they could sell their capital gains up to $98,000 of income and pay zero federal capital gains tax. So as an example, let's say a couple had $40,000 of taxable income. They could sell $58,000 of capital gains and pay zero tax on that $58,000 of capital gains under current law. This could be of tremendous value for you to know in light of current and future tax recommendations. Another very important provision, it would be capping any amount in the IRA or 401k at $3.4 million. Now I know that's a high number, but there's some folks that are getting there. And this number is calculated by having an insurance company determine the joint and survivor amount that would provide $210,000 annually for a 62-year-old couple. Now here's the bad news. $3.4 million at 1% interest provides $34,000 a year. At 2%, it provides $68,000. At 3%, it provides $102,000. Right? And these are safe money interest rates for money markets, government bonds, certificates of deposit, even fixed interest annuities. And all that money would be needed to provide the income. But here's the good news. If you do the calculations on that $210,000 figure, on a joint couple at age 62, that's actually 6.17% of $3.4 million. So first, the older a couple, the higher the payout. Why is that? Mortality, or even a better word is longevity credits. Okay, if interest rates remain low, and I believe that they're going to, longevity credits become more and more valuable to retirees. So at 70, 75, and 80 years old, the payout could be between 7 and 9% if these low rates persist. Okay, so that means that you could have $210,000 per year as long as you both lived at age 62 versus $34,000, $68,000, $102,000 at a low interest rate. All right, so, all right, I know this was a lot, and I'm not expecting you to fully understand all of this. The ultimate goal of me talking about these things is to get you thinking about your future. All right, the best time to do that was yesterday or the day before or way back in time, but we can't travel back in time. So the next best time is today. I'm afraid too many of you are just throwing money into your 401k thinking everything's going to be fine. And boy, I'm telling you, I think you're going to have a huge, rude awakening when you get to retirement and realize that you don't have what you thought you had. Traditional planning, in my opinion, my learned opinion, and all the research I've done, is an abject failure for almost all of us. In fact, I can make an argument that that it is for everybody, but really the top 1% of wealth. Okay, because even the next 4%, if they make a mistake or two or three, could lose enough that it's going to definitely reduce their lifestyle in retirement. Now, the top 1% is pretty protected, but they also have many people protecting what they have. So keep these things in mind, folks. And if something struck a chord with you, give me a call. I'm happy to help you to take a look at your situation to see if there's anything that we can do to improve it. If you've followed any of my stuff, you know that I'm I'm anti-401k, 403b. I think it's great to put money away, but I don't think that that's the best, most efficient, safest vehicle for you to do it in. So I hope you enjoyed today's or this week's installment of Your Money Matters. Sorry I missed last week, but it just couldn't be avoided. I was out of town, didn't have time to get one put together. So I like to try to do these once a week for everybody. If you found the information here valuable, please share the link with your friends, family, anybody you care about, you work with, or anyone along those lines that you think that might find benefit in it. So thanks for tuning in, and I will talk to you next week.